Good morning and welcome to Marjorie's Table on this Wednesday, the 25th of February. We are going to do what we always do in this session. We're going to do a quick warm up and we're going to look at three poems. I've already said this publicly. Normally, I don't say who we're going to look at, but we're going to look at three poems by the great Kay Ryan this morning. If you're new to Marjorie's Table or you're trying us out, thanks for joining us. I wanted you to have a look at what we were up to in these sessions and in the recordings. Um, I hope that I'll see lots of you this evening at a session on Zafir Kunal, which is a deep dive. I'm calling it deep dive. It's really a craft book group, so no need to do anything in advance. We'll come to the poems together and largely just look at them for craft notes, of course, to enjoy them, but also for craft notes in ways that we can kind of glean what the writer's doing and how we can maybe apply some of that bit of learning to our own writing. And that session will be recorded too. So if you're a paid subscriber, you'll be able to access it whenever you like. I'll drop the link to it again in this morning's email. Okay, let's get started. I have lots to say about Kay Ryan. I'm sure you will too. If you don't know her work, I hope you will love her as much as I do by the end of the session. And if not, that would be interesting to know too. But before we do that, we're going to do a quick warm up, the usual warm up, no right or wrong way to do it. The idea is to make a list of words that come to mind with the two words that I'm going to give you. It's free association. You will not have to explain how you got there. So the first word for this morning is climb. Climb, C-L-I-M-B. I'm always worried of my American accent, people will get a different word, but that's good too. Climb. I'll pop that in the chat box just now. Make a list of words of whatever comes to mind for climb. And now do fall. A list of words for fall. And if you'd like to share a few of your words in the chat box too, and I'll read them out, I will do the same, but no pressure. Okay, here come some of the words. Apologies if you're one of the folks who's late this morning. I know I didn't send a link as usual. I sent a meeting in passcode because of the Zoom bomber situation. So apologies if that's made you late this morning, but you can get caught up. The idea here is I'm going to read some of the words. If you're live, you'll be able to see them in the chat box. Steal a couple that you like the sound of. Stick them on your list. Here we go. Foothold, tumble, ivy, beautiful, scrape, monkey bars, pregnant, stairway, attic, tumble, spill, scamper, spider monkey, beautiful, the tumultuous state of being, oneself, that's wonderful, surrender, vine, decline, traverse, peak, tie my laces, tacky boots, tackety boots, that's lovely, tackety is so lovely to say, thanks, Leah, rucksack, tumble, another tumble, descend, crevasse, fall from grace, handholds, beautiful, short of breath, scupper, and dissect. We've got stacks of beautiful words here this morning. So take a few of those, stick them on your list. And the idea here is to try and write when you get to writing and you decide what you're going to write about, try and use one of these words in your writing, if you can. If you don't like the idea, you can just ignore me. At any point today, you can ignore me. But the idea is to try and come at a story perhaps that you know already from a different angle. So if you're trying to use handholds in a piece of work around a cup of tea with your granny, how do you get it in? And already my brain's thinking, ooh, a handhold of a conversation. There's all sorts of interesting ways of coming at a story through a new word. And often that makes us see things fresh for ourselves, which I think is useful. And if you don't like it, you can always take it out later. I'm going to add one more scree. Beautiful. So we're going to look at the work of Kay Ryan this morning. And again, if you forget to do that, it's absolutely fine. Um, she was the poet laureate of the US, and I'm going to share my screen, but I've also popped the link into the chat box in case you'd like to um, follow along on your own screen. I don't think I'll tell you much about her until we listen to the poem because I think it's nice to come to them fresh. Here we go. Let's listen to her read this. Partly I've chosen poems that we get to hear her read this morning.
Usually, I don't write from inspiration. I just sit down and write. But in this case, I was lying in bed and I suddenly had this vision that everybody in the world was carrying a ladder. And it was a very moving thought to me. And it became this poem. Carrying a ladder. We are always really carrying a ladder, but it's invisible. We only know something's the matter. Something precious crashes. Easy doors prove impassable. Or in the body, there's too much swing or off-centered gravity. And in the mind, a drunken capacity, access to out-of-range apples, as though one had a way to climb out of the damage and apology.
Okay, let me plug myself back in again. So I'm going to give you a couple of craft notes about it again, then we'll listen to her read it, or I'll read it again, I think, just for speed. And then if you've got thoughts on the poem, please pop them in the chat box. So, of course, the form, if you know me at all, you'll know I'm going to comment on form, this tall, thin poem, which is actually characteristic of Kay's work anyway. But of course, the form is an interesting thing. On the page, it's suggesting to us that it's a ladder. It's suggesting to us this tall and thin thing. And it feels for me a bit like falling. The short line lengths kind of tumble us into the next line, which I think is for me what short line lengths do. It's always useful to see what it does for you because that will change the way you edit your work. But for me, the short line lengths mean that we're tumbling down this poem, which is interesting, particularly in a poem about a ladder, which of course suggests that we should be climbing. So I think that's the first thing that's really interesting to note. We've had this note from her about what it's about, but mostly writers come to a poem on the page without the notes. And so the question is, what does the title do for us? And here it does everything, right? It tells us what's happening in the poem, and we're straight into we are always really carrying a ladder. It means the ladder can appear in the third line, because we already know what we're carrying. We already know what we're talking about. So it's a really great introduction. Um, Interesting that she's chosen to break off center, which I think here we are, off center. And the language is doing what it implies as well. It's showing us what off-center feels like because we have to move straight into that next line. So the off-centerness is actually working in the poem physically as well as the idea of it. And then the other thing to note is all the rhyme and slant rhyme and what it does for the poem. She uses a lot of rhyme in her poetry, and I was listening to a podcast about her where someone said that she had always wanted to write in rhyme, but actually it was kind of considered old-fashioned or too traditional when she started writing, but she uses it so often because she likes the way what it does in a poem. And for the question for us as readers is, what does it do in a poem? And therefore, what does it do when we add rhyme into our own poems? So Let me read it to you one more time, and then I can see that some folks have ideas about it too, which is always really useful. Just to say, this is one of the books she's best known for, called The Best of It. And if I flip through it, most of the poems are small, one page, tall and thin little poems. So this is a form that she's known for, although I think it's particularly useful to see it in a poem about a ladder. Carrying a ladder. We are always really carrying a ladder, but it's invisible. We only know something's the matter. Something precious crashes, easy doors prove impassable, or in the body, there's too much swing or off-center gravity, and in the mind, a drunken capacity, access to out-of-range apples, as though one had a way to climb out of the damage and apology. It's interesting that last word apology because my brain wants it to be apologize and it isn't. And it rhymes in a way that helps us lock into apology. But I think for me, it's a little bit of a twist. It makes me go back and think again. One other note, I went to see Kay Reid at the Edinburgh Book Festival many years ago. And the thing that stuck with me, apart from her poetry, which is wonderful, was her saying that people in the world always want more. They're asking for more and more. Would you like seconds? Would you like another helping? Would you like a bigger portion? Do you want to supersize that or whatever they say at McDonald's these days? And she said, my instinct is always to ask for less. Actually, what I want out of this world is less. And everybody's always asking me more. And when I went to look up articles about her, ahead of today, it's interesting to me that the New Yorker's article about her is called Think Small. And it says that she has this sort of anathema against bigness, which is interesting too. I can send a link to that article in the email today, so you can read it for yourself. Okay, a couple of comments from you. Lots of comments. Fabulous rhymes. Astonishing how her mind climbs. Yeah, it feels like we're moving up, and yet the poem is moving us down. Love the off at the end of the line, Janet. Yep. It is the seamless intermingling of climb and fall in this poem that gives it a unique rhythm. Yeah, I agree. Yes, exactly. The tumble through the poem, those last two lanes, a way of climbing out of the damage, an apology. That final line break. Yeah, I didn't even talk about line breaks because when you have a poem like this, you have so many opportunities to use your line breaks well in a way that makes your reader lean in or think hard or think about something else, kind of put their own 2 cents in, which is really beautiful. The rhymes are drunken, making the latter treacherous. That's a lovely image, Louise. I love how she made the visual comedy into something bittersweet and touching. Yeah. Out of range apples is a memorable image, Ali. Yeah, I think it is too. And then that's the question is where we're on a ladder, we're still not quite there, reaching for an apple. Eve, I hadn't thought of that. That's a really nice idea too. And knowledge, reaching for knowledge. So many possibilities. And I think one of the things I'm learning for sure as I look at poems with you more critically is the smaller the poem, often the more opportunity there is to read more into it. So I suspect her work starts out bigger and then ends up smaller, but she's definitely always going for the small and saying less. Okay, we could spend 30 minutes talking about this poem, but we've got two more and at least two prompts to get through today. So, write about the act of carrying or climbing a ladder. Your ladder, maybe, or you can write in somebody else's voice, a ladder that somebody else was carrying. It can be a real ladder. It can be, as Kay says, this sort of metaphorical ladder that we're all carrying, but also try and get some specificity in there about the quality of the ladder or the heft of it or the weight of it. It's 45 minutes past. I will give us 6 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes of writing before I call us back, and I'll give you a sort of 30-second warning as we're wrapping up. Always feel free to hit the mute button and carry on writing if you've hit a rich vein. You can catch up with us later. And I'll pop all of that in the chat box and bring us back together in 6 or 7 minutes. Just another minute or so. Okay. Before we move on, just to say that poem makes me think of the beautiful piece of artwork by Alec Finlay in a sculpture park near us in Scotland called A Variety of Cultures. It's in an apple and plum orchard, and he's built ladders to the height that each tree is anticipated to grow to, which is really interesting. So when you saw it when the orchard was new, it felt like asking these young trees to reach to the level that they're supposed to reach in. But it was a really interesting sort of statement about expectations or requirements or yeah, however you take it. I'll maybe send a link along to that too, because it's an interesting comparison to Kay's work. Right, we're going to listen to a second poem by her. This one, the note is almost longer than the poem, but I'll unplug and let you listen to her if you need it.
The reason that I find this poem really terrifying is that for me, it's about when your mind comes apart and all you have is separate cars. And the things that are inside those cars can't keep you alive if your mind comes apart. 100 bolts of satin.
It's interesting. She's reading a different poem on this note, which we're going to look at. So keep that note in mind. What she says in this note about Crown is that this poem came from running and cycling in the hills just above San Francisco and Marin County, and we're at a time when a lot of big trees had come down, which we've had in Britain over the last couple of years. Here it is, this tiny poem, Crown. Too much rain loosens trees. In the hills, giant oaks fall upon their knees. You can touch parts you have no right to, places only birds should fly to. Read it one more time. Notice how much work the title is doing here. Crown. Too much rain loosens trees. In the hills, giant oaks fall upon their knees. You can touch parts you have no right to, places only birds should fly to. Okay, write about a mighty tree that's fallen, metaphorically or in real life. You've got 5 minutes to do that. Remember, you've got a whole bank of interesting words as well. But a mighty tree of some kind, it can be a metaphor for a person who's fallen, it can be an actual tree. Um, yeah, her simplicity gives us a lot of hope, doesn't it? It gives us permission, I think, in a way, which is really wonderful. And again, I feel like I should do a whole session on titles because this title is doing so much work. What is the crown? Is it a royal crown? Is it a crown of the tree? Of course, there's lots of things. A couple of comments which I'll read out. Her simplicity gives me hope. Lovely. The effect went across the screen. I don't know what it was. It was probably a heart, like walking on the beach when the tide is right back and suddenly realizing it should be underwater. Yeah. It reminds me of Spike Milligan's humorous poem for kids. Yeah, I think the rhyme feels very comfortable and natural. And there's something for me that's really soothing about rhyme, which I kind of hadn't expected. So it's something to think about in our editing practice. I would say don't try and force rhyme when you're trying to write just now, but it's interesting to see what it does and whether you want to include it. It also feels kind of sacred. I agree, Leah. Yeah. Okay. Head off and write about a mighty tree that's fallen for 4 minutes, and we'll bring us back together to listen to the poem that she was just talking about on her way out the door. I'll pop that in the chat box just now. Another few seconds on this one. Okay, before you go off this morning, let me read you this poem, which is also in the chat box, called 100 Bolts of Satin. I won't, you've listened to most of the note anyway, so I will let you go back and listen to it if you want to. 100 Bolts of Satin. All you have to lose is one connection, and the mind uncouples all the way back. It seems to have been a train. There seems to have been a track. The things that you unpack from the abandoned cars cannot sustain life. A crate of tractor axles, for example, a dozen clasp knives, 100 bolts of satin. Perhaps you specialized more than you imagined. I'm going to leave you with that beautiful idea. And I just want you to write about what's in your carriages this morning as a way of leaving you. If the mind is a bunch of train carriages, as she described, what's in your carriages? Huge apologies to some of you who might be watching the recording because you weren't able to get in this morning's session without a link. I think the Zoom bomber had me spooked, but I will go back to sending the link out in future and hope that he doesn't. And he was a he, sadly. I know that for a fact for sure. It doesn't follow me into this session, but thanks for being here with me live, those of you who did manage to log in using the codes. And lovely to see so many of you, and maybe see some of you tonight for the deep dive with on Zafar's work. I hope you find lots of Kay's work in your life because it's a real joy. I'll send a few extra links this morning. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.